There's a room no one speaks of. It isn't gilded, it isn't grand. But every person who ever built a life of true wealth, not just riches but rhythm, walked into it and closed the door behind them. This room has no windows, no applause, no posts, only the silence of truth. It looks like early mornings that no one sees. It sounds like a calm breath when the rest of the world is screaming. It feels like certainty, not from knowing everything, but from choosing not to abandon yourself again. And yet, no one told you about it. Not your teachers, not your mentors, not the internet gods of hustle. They spoke of grind, sacrifice, productivity. But they never spoke of this, the internal law that all great builders followed before the world saw a single result. Not a tactic, not a trick, a law, invisible but unbreakable. It says, "He who commands himself never chases the world." They knew this, and they lived by it, in private, before they made their first dollar, before the world cared. They obeyed this quiet law like a priest obeys the altar. While others sought noise, they returned to inner command. But you were thrown into chaos, told to try harder, work longer, write lists, set goals, fix your mindset, fix your schedule, fix your flaws. And when it didn't work, when the results stayed stuck, you were left with nothing but shame. You blamed your inconsistency, your lack of drive, your so-called procrastination. You wondered what was wrong with you. But nothing was wrong with you. You were trying to build a cathedral without ever being shown the blueprint. They had it, not because they were special, but because someone, somewhere, whispered it early enough for them to remember. The outer world is a slave to the one who commands the inner. And that's what they did, quietly, repeatedly. They built a pattern around this law. They returned to the silent room every day, long before success ever arrived. They didn't wait for motivation. They didn't beg for clarity. They moved from a vow and a sacred self-command and that no one else could see, and the results became inevitable. But here's what matters more than their results. You're here now, reading these words, feeling the weight of a truth you always sensed but could never name. The truth that maybe you weren't broken. Maybe you were just never shown the rule. Not the rule for winning, the rule for returning unto yourself, to the rhythm within, to the seat of your own authority, to the command that still waits underneath the noise. You don't need another strategy right now. You need silence and alignment. You need to remember what they practiced when no one was watching. And as we enter this story, that's exactly what we'll do. We'll name the noise that led you astray. We'll reveal the rule, the one they all followed in secret. We'll walk through the sacred pattern they lived by. And most of all, we'll return to the truth. You were never lazy. You were never lost. You were just never shown the law. Until now. Welcome back to the silent room. The door is open. There's a kind of noise that doesn't sound loud until you try to get still. It's not the noise of traffic or crowds. It's internal, relentless, invisible, and ancient. A chorus of echoes you never consciously chose. But they've been choosing for you. You're falling behind. Why can't you stay consistent? Try harder. Fix yourself. This is your fault. Everyone else seems to figure it out. These aren't thoughts. They're programming. They came wrapped in advice, delivered with smiles, often from well-meaning mouths. But they were forged in systems built on urgency and shame. You didn't enter the world this way. You didn't wake up at 7 years old and say, "Let me abandon my rhythm. Let me obey noise." No. You were taught it, bit by bit. From bells that told you when to learn. From grades that decided your worth. From adults who praised performance but never presence. From media that showed you success, but never the sacred stillness behind it. And slowly, a silent agreement formed inside of you. If I want to matter, I must be loud, I must produce, I must chase. That was the first theft, not of your effort, but of your command. The lie of hustle and the birth of internal war. The world made you think you needed more motivation, but what you really needed was a clean signal, a clear voice. Instead, you inherited a battlefield. A mind so cluttered with commands from the outside, you forgot how to hear your own. The voice of inner knowing, the one that whispers in stillness, became drowned out by the voice of pressure. You've lived with this for so long it feels normal. You wake up already behind. You start the day with noise in your chest. You scroll for clarity and leave more fragmented. You try to force discipline but feel fractured, like a soldier fighting without a map. Not because you're weak, not because you lack drive, but because you were never trained to listen inward. They told you how to succeed, but not how to hear yourself. They told you to visualize the outcome, but not to respect the rhythm. So now, your hours are heavy with contradiction. You crave stillness, but feel guilty when you pause. You desire impact, but doubt you'll ever feel enough. You start routines, but secretly resent them. And underneath it all, you're exhausted, but not from laziness, from internal war. You didn't procrastinate. You split. Let's name something clearly. You didn't fail to execute. You were split in two. One part of you knew what mattered, the deeper part, the intuitive part, the part that longed to rise early, speak clearly, build slowly, the part that felt God close when the world was quiet. But the other part? It obeyed the noise, the expectations, the algorithm, the urgency. And when those two parts clashed, you didn't collapse. You dissociated, you delayed, you doubted, you got stuck. Not because you were weak, but because no one taught you how to return, how to command. How to take the seat of the conductor, not the servant. This isn't about productivity, this is about possession. Who holds the reins, not of your schedule, of your spirit? The noise wants you reactive, not receptive. Here's something they never told you. The system isn't broken. It works exactly as designed. It wants you consuming, doubting, rushing. It rewards noise and punishes presence. It glorifies momentum, but never asks if that momentum is aligned. That's why you've felt so torn. You've been trying to follow truth in a world that incentivizes distortion. You've been told you need more strategy. You need a 5 a.m. routine. You need to become obsessed. You need to earn your worth, but none of those messages hold when you're still. Because in stillness something ancient speaks, and it never uses pressure. It says, you don't need to chase, you need to return. You were always meant to command. Every millionaire you admire, if you peel back the story, wasn't driven by panic. They were trained by rhythm, by daily alignment, by an inner law that said, if I command the day, the results will follow. But they didn't get there by force. They got there by a kind of reverence, a sacred pattern of self-ownership, a refusal to let the noise dictate the next move, a knowing that their inner state would shape their outer world. They followed this rule in silence. But no one told you. So instead of command, you've tried compensation. You tried to feel worthy through output. You tried to fix the doubt with dopamine. You tried to push your way to peace, and now you're tired. Not just physically, but spiritually, because deep down, you know, this was never about effort. This was always about alignment. You are not. Behind, you're on the edge of clarity. If your chest is tight as you read this, if your eyes sting with tears you don't quite understand, good. Not because pain is the goal, but because recognition is. You're not here for hacks. You're here to remember. Remember what it feels like to trust yourself again, to rise with clarity, to move without frenzy, to stop waiting for proof before you act from truth. You've been haunted by the echo chamber long enough. It's time to hear your own voice again, not the loud one, the quiet one, steady, anchored, clean. You don't need to burn down your life. You just need to stop obeying noise that was never yours. And when you do, you'll hear something else begin to rise. The same thing they heard. The ones who built real wealth, the rule. Not shouted, not sold, just obeyed. In silence. There is a moment in every great story where the hero stops asking for the path and starts following the signal, not from the sky, not from the crowd, but from within. That moment doesn't look heroic. It often happens in sweatpants, in a quiet kitchen, in a journal no one reads. But it is the moment everything changes, because from that moment on, they stop chasing motivation. They begin obeying command. And this is what they never told you. Every person who built enduring wealth, not just money, but a life of power, peace and pattern, lived by this one rule: command of self precedes command of life, not control, not discipline. Command. Let's clarify something. This rule is not about control. It's not about wrangling your impulses or white-knuckling your calendar. Control comes from fear. Command comes from identity. Discipline says I must force myself. Command says this is who I am. The millionaires, the real ones, not just the loud ones, they didn't force themselves into consistency. They returned to it. Daily, silently, without drama. They didn't wait until they felt like it. They didn't argue with the resistance. They just chose again and again to obey their own inner authority. That's the rule. It's not sexy. It's not trending. But it's undefeated, and it's always been hiding in plain sight. Rhythm over rush. You were told to hustle. They can't see. Followed a rhythm. You were told to grind. They practiced return. You were told to be obsessed. They were anchored. This is the paradox. The world sees the results and calls them disciplined. But inside, they're not operating from pressure. They're operating from pattern. They built a way of being that made success automatic. Not because of what they did, but because of what they no longer negotiated. No more negotiating with feelings. No more debates with doubt. No more bargaining with clarity. Just a quiet daily yes to the inner command. They didn't need pep talks. They had pattern. They had command. Why no one talks about it? You may wonder, if this rule is so powerful, why doesn't anyone talk about it? Because it can't be sold. It doesn't fit in a funnel. It can't be faked. You can't download it or outsource it, and it doesn't offer instant gratification. It offers inner transformation. It demands that you sit with yourself in without noise and decide, who commands this vessel? Who sets the tone? Who tells the day what it will be? Most people don't want to ask those questions because the mirror is too honest. It's easier to chase another strategy, easier to blame the algorithm, the season, the market, easier to say, I just need to try harder. But the rule doesn't care about effort. The rule only responds to authority, not external, internal. The inner compass doesn't scream. If you've ever held a compass, you know this. It doesn't talk. It doesn't vibrate. It doesn't shout over you, it just waits. Still, certain, clear. It always knew where north was, you just had to stop spinning. That's how inner command works. It's not a motivational fire. It's a sacred stillness. And once you align with it, it becomes impossible to forget. This is what the wealthy followed. They didn't need more information. They needed confirmation from within that they were walking in command. That's what made them dangerous. Not money. Not status, authority. The kind that can't be given, only remembered. You were always meant to lead yourself. Here's the truth that no one handed you. You were designed to lead yourself, but instead you were trained to obey, to conform, to wait for permission to outsource your knowing. You were praised when you followed the rules of others. You were punished when you listened too deeply to your own compass, so you stopped trusting it, you stopped checking it, and eventually, you forgot where it even was. But it never stopped working. It just went silent, waiting for you to return. And now that you're here, now that you're reading these words and something ancient is awakening in your chest, you feel it again. Don't you? The inner compass, the rule that always lived beneath the noise, it doesn't beg you, it just states, with unshakable clarity, command of self precedes command of life. And when you obey it, even once, the fog begins. Too clear what obedience to the rule looks like. Let's make this real. Not lofty, not abstract. Here's what obeying this rule actually looks like. Waking before the world and deciding the tone of your day before anyone else does. Returning to the same sacred rituals, even when you don't feel like it, because command doesn't need feelings. Speaking truth out loud even when your voice shakes, because self-silencing is self-betrayal. Creating from alignment, not urgency, because urgency never produces resonance. Saying no to distractions that once ruled you, not out of discipline but identity. These aren't acts of effort, they're acts of inner royalty, because once you remember who you are, you stop negotiating with the version of you that forgot. You stop arguing with resistance. You stop postponing your presence. You stop checking if today is the right day. You just return. This rule is already in you. Let this land. This rule isn't something you need to install. It's something you need to uncover. It's already in you. It always was. That's why nothing else ever worked. Not fully, not sustainably. Because every system you tried was built on the wrong assumption that you needed to be told what to do. But now you know. You only needed to remember who commands, and now that you do, everything begins to shift. Not instantly, not dramatically, but deeply, permanently, like a train that finally clicks onto the right track, not by speeding up but by aligning correctly. That's what this chapter is, the click. The shift, the moment your compass comes back online. Let them chase tactics, you follow the rule. Command of self precedes command of life. Say it slowly. Let it echo, then prepare. Because next, we return to the flame. The sacred ritual they all protected. The pattern that made inner command not just a moment, but a lifestyle. There is a flame inside you, not chaotic, not consuming, but steady. Sure, ancient. The ones who built real wealth, they didn't just feed this flame occasionally, they framed their life around it. You didn't see it on the surface. What you saw was results, discipline, growth. But underneath it all, it was a sacred pattern, a structure that served the flame. They didn't wait to feel inspired. They built lives that protected the signal, routines that returned them to clarity. Even when the world pulled them away, you thought they were more motivated. But they were simply more aligned because they didn't rely on emotion. They relied on ritual. The flame, inner command made visible. Let's begin with the flame. It's not literal fire, but it behaves like one. It responds to breath. It responds to stillness. It responds to devotion. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be outsourced. It cannot be faked. It is the presence of your inner authority, the essence of command. Every morning you sit in silence. The flame is fed. Every time you act from alignment instead of fear, the flame grows brighter. Every time you say, I return instead of I failed, the flame steadies. This is why those who rise early don't just wake up. They return to the flame, to the center, to the code they carry. The frame's sacred structure that protects the flame, but flame without a frame burns out. And that's what most people miss. They want the fire of clarity, but they have no structure to hold it. The wealthy, as the ones you admire, not just for what they've built, but how they walk. They didn't just build routines. They built frames. Structures not made for performance, but for preservation. The frame is what you return to when the mind wanders. The frame is what keeps the command clear when the world gets loud. Think of it like this. The flame is your presence. The frame is your practice, and every person who mastered inner command lived by both. What the sacred pattern looks like. This is not a checklist. This is not a morning routine you copy-paste. This is the sacred pattern, a rhythm designed to protect, command, and preserve alignment. It includes consecrated time, a block of time that no one else owns. Not for productivity, for alignment. It could be 20 minutes or 2 hours, but it is untouchable, non-negotiable. This is where the flame is fed. Anchor practices. Stillness, breath, word, not to calm down, but to remember. These are acts of devotion, not optimization. Prayer, meditation, walking in silence. One sacred act done daily becomes the signal. Returning rituals, when distraction pulls you away, and it will, you don't spiral. You return, with breath, with posture, with choice. You don't restart your life. You return to the pattern. Evening closure. Command ends the day just as it begins it, not with noise, but reflection. Questions like, did I lead from truth today? Where did I obey fear instead of flame? What will I carry forward? This is how clarity compounds. Sacred, not rigid. Let's be clear, this isn't a productivity cult. This isn't about waking up at 4:45 a.m. just to say you did. This is about treating your life like a temple, your time like a canvas, your attention like prayer. The pattern is sacred, not rigid. It adjusts with seasons, but it never breaks under pressure, because it wasn't built by pressure. It was built by identity, why they protected it. Like a secret. Here's the truth. Those who lived this way rarely advertised it, because the pattern wasn't for performance, it was for power, not dominance, but alignment, not status, but sovereignty. It wasn't built to be impressive. It was built to be undeniable. They knew that when the world grew chaotic, and it always does, they could withstand the storm, because their flame was protected, and their frame held. No one saw them light the candle at dawn. No one filmed them walking the same loop each morning in silence. No one praised them for declining that unaligned opportunity. But the results, the clarity, the peace under pressure, that's what people saw. And they mistook it for talent. But it was the sacred pattern. Return to the pattern, not the performance when you drift. And you will. Don't panic. Don't punish. Don't restart from zero. Return to the breath, to the room, to the decision. I command, I return, I remember. That's the whisper. The ones who walked this path never tried to be perfect. They just never allowed the drift to become the default. They didn't shame themselves when they strayed. They returned, quickly, quietly. Because to them, the pattern wasn't a burden. It was home. You don't need a new system. You need a sacred one. If you're thinking, I've tried routines before and they didn't stick. Of course they didn't, because they were based on pressure. They were tied to outcomes. They were filled with shoulds. But now no sacred pattern has nothing to do with pressure and everything to do with power. Not the kind that shouts, the kind that stays, the kind that doesn't skip the flame because the world feels urgent, the kind that wakes each morning and whispers, "This is who I am. I do not negotiate my clarity." What begins when the pattern holds, when your pattern holds? You stop chasing feelings. You stop questioning your worth. You stop trying to become and simply embody. Decisions become cleaner. Emotions become wiser. Presence becomes default. And from this state, wealth is inevitable, because your vibration no longer fluctuates with the news. Your value no longer rides the waves of external praise. You become reliable to yourself. That's the ultimate wealth. Build yours now. So take this moment, right now, and breathe. Not to relax. To align, ask, what would my flame need in the morning? What would my frame look like if I trusted myself deeply? What sacred act will I never again negotiate? You don't need a planner. You need a vow, a return, a rhythm, a room within your day that no one else can enter. You don't owe anyone that time. You owe it to the flame. Because when the world gets dark, when the noise returns, when doubt whispers and results delay, the sacred pattern will still be there waiting. And when you walk back into it, you'll remember, I never needed more pressure. I just needed to protect the flame. There is a moment when the mirror cracks. It doesn't shatter from trauma, but from truth. A single realization so clear, so liberating, it breaks the false reflection you've been staring at your whole life. And that realization is this: you were never lazy. You were never inconsistent. You were never undisciplined. You were simply unaligned. You were following instructions for a version of yourself that never existed. Trying to obey systems that were never built for your rhythm. Trying to force results while your soul was quietly saying, this isn't who we are. And every time you betrayed that voice, you didn't just lose time. You lost trust, not in the world, in yourself. When self-betrayal becomes identity, the first time you ignored your body's wisdom, it stung. The 10th time, it ached. The 100th time, it became normal, and that's when the shame began. Because the pain of self-abandonment doesn't just live in your behavior, it lodges itself into your identity. It whispers, I can't be trusted. I'm the problem. I'm just not disciplined. But here's what no one told you. You weren't disobedient, you were misdirected. You weren't unmotivated, you were misaligned. You were trying to build a masterpiece using someone else's blueprint. And every time it failed, you thought you were the issue. But it was never you. It was the mirror. It was broken, the lie. Of the flawed self, there's a cultural script that runs deep, and it sounds like this. If I could just fix myself, I'd finally succeed. If I had more willpower, I'd be consistent. If I worked harder, I'd finally be proud. That script is poison because it places the burden of alignment on effort instead of essence. It assumes that who you are isn't enough, so you must become someone else to earn peace. But look closer. The ones who walk in power, peace, and wealth, they aren't trying to be different. They are aligned with who they've always been. They stopped editing themselves to fit the world and started building a world that fit their code. Discipline is the fruit, not the root. You've been chasing discipline like it's the seed, but it's not. Discipline is the fruit of alignment. It grows automatically when your inner world is integrated. When you remember who you are, what you value, what you're here to create, what your soul needs to feel whole, the need for force disappears. Clarity takes its place. Discipline doesn't come from pressure. It comes from identity. So stop asking, why can't I be consistent? Start asking, where am I living out of alignment with who I actually am? Because when alignment returns, so does rhythm, so does peace, so does momentum, but the kind that doesn't burn you out. You are not a problem to fix. Take this in. You are not a productivity project. You are not a checklist in need of more checkmarks. You are not a late bloomer. You are not a missed opportunity. You are a vessel of rhythm, of fire, of command. And if your results have been inconsistent, it's not because you lack value. It's because the vessel wasn't aligned with its essence. That's not a flaw. That's an invitation to slow down, to recenter, to rebuild, not from pressure but from presence. The real reason you resisted your own routines. Let's tell the truth, you didn't fail to follow through. You resisted the routine because part of you knew it wasn't yours. The steps were right, but the spirit was wrong. You were told, wake up earlier, work harder, add more, fix your mindset, optimize everything. But no one asked, does this align with your inner compass? Does this bring you home to yourself? Is this rooted in identity or insecurity? You resisted because part of you remembered the truth. You're not here to mimic. You're here to embody who you were before the world reprogrammed. You think back, before the labels, before the hustle, before the calendar controlled you, before the shame of inconsistency taught you to hide. There was a version of you that was still, clear, attuned, commanding. They didn't need validation to act. They didn't doubt their voice. They didn't feel late because they trusted divine timing. That version of you isn't gone, they are waiting. And every act of alignment, every breath of return, every step into sacred routine brings them closer. Remember the flame, rebuild the frame. So now, with your identity realigning, what comes next? You remember the flame, you rebuild the frame. But this time, it fits who you really are. No more systems that suffocate, no more rituals that impress but exhaust. Just a return, a gentle, firm return to the command that has always lived in your bones. This is how the mirror is restored, not by trying to be someone new, but by removing everything that blurred the reflection. Your true self is not hiding, just waiting. If you've been feeling like your life is on pause, it's not. It's just been paused on a frequency that wasn't yours. Now, as the mirror clears and the echo fades, you begin to hear the true signal again. The voice that says, I am not lazy, I am not broken, I am a leader, I am a vessel, I am flame and frame. I command, not by effort, but by essence. And from that place, you don't need to prove anything, you just need to return. Return to truth, return to rhythm, return to the version of you who never doubted, because alignment isn't a result, it's a remembrance, and you've always carried the code. There is a man who never raises his voice. He stands before 100 instruments, each louder, more complex, more chaotic than him. But he does not yell, he does not panic, he does not perform. He lifts one hand, and they obey. Not from fear, but from recognition. He is the conductor, Not because he controls the noise, but because he commands the pattern. This is the image. This is the truth. This is you. You've tried to build wealth by chasing noise. Now, you build it by becoming the quiet conductor of your world. Real wealth doesn't begin in the bank, let's name this clearly. Wealth is not money. Money is the echo. Wealth is authority. Not authority over others. Authority over your signal, your word, your rhythm. This is the law the world never told you. The external obeys the internal. Before the business grew, the voice grew. Before the followers came, the identity aligned. Before the systems scaled, the soul stabilized, and once inner command was established, outer wealth became a natural consequence, not always quickly, but always surely. When you command, you do. Less but become more. Most people build their life by force. They try everything. They say yes to too much. They dilute. But when you walk in command, something profound happens. You do less. But what you do moves mountains, because every action carries coherence, every word carries resonance, every decision carries clarity. This is how the wealthy multiply time, not through hacks, through alignment. Because when you're aligned, there's no internal drag, no second guessing, no negotiating your value every morning. You don't waste energy becoming someone else. You become more you, and the world responds. Your energy is your economy. Let's reframe the question. It's not, how do I earn more? It's, where is my energy leaking? You are the asset. You are the instrument. And when your energy is fractured, your results will be too. But when your energy is consolidated, clarified, aligned, and commanded, your life becomes magnetic. You attract not just opportunities, but the right ones, the aligned ones, the ones that meet you at your frequency, because wealth isn't pursued, it's invited by the presence of command. The wealthy don't chase, they channel. The ones who walk in power, they don't scramble, they don't need to prove. They have a different posture, a different pace, a different presence, because they know every great harvest began as an internal law obeyed, so they channel. They build from stillness, they speak when it's time. They move when the signal says move, not when the world panics, and because of that their life multiplies, not through panic, through precision. Your purpose has been waiting for your alignment. There are ideas waiting in your spirit. There are blueprints folded inside your breath, but they haven't moved, not because you're lazy, because you haven't stood up in full command yet. Ideas don't respond to hope. They respond to structure, integrity, follow-through. Purpose doesn't need more vision boards. It needs a vessel that can carry it. You are that vessel. And every time you return to your inner flame, every time you obey your sacred pattern, every time you choose alignment over urgency, you become strong enough to host your calling. That's what the wealthy did. They didn't just dream big. They became vessels big enough to hold what they saw. And now it's your turn. Your new currency. Clarity, energy, obedience. The game has changed. No more trading time for money. No more performing for praise. No more collapsing under the weight of your potential. From here forward, your currency is spiritual. You are paid in proportion to your clarity, how clean your signal is, your energy, how consolidated. Your presence is your obedience, how consistently you return to command. This is why some create more in 1 hour than others do in a week. It's not luck, it's alignment. They are not better. They are built and inwardly. And now so are you. You don't need to work harder. You need to decide. Let this pierce through the doubt. You don't need another strategy. You need a decision to become unshakable, to stop leaking your power, to stop postponing your alignment. Because when you decide, really decide, the universe listens, not because of magic, but because clarity creates movement. The moment you stop outsourcing your worth, the moment you stop obeying panic, the moment you say, I command, I choose, I return, you become the conductor, and life, slowly, then suddenly, begins. To respond, start building with command. Now this isn't about waiting until you feel ready. This is about choosing rhythm now. Start small, start quiet, start real. Declare your mornings sacred. Choose one act of alignment and protect it. Make one decision today as if you already are the version of you long to become. Don't ask for proof, become it. Don't chase certainty, command it. Your future does not need a louder version of you. It needs a clearer one, and you have everything required to become that and today. You've always been the signal, so here we are. Not at the end of a chapter, but the beginning of clarified command. From this day forward, you don't move to feel worthy. You move because you already are. You don't act to become powerful. You act because you've remembered that you are. The flame has been restored. The frame has been rebuilt. And the world, it is waiting to respond, but it no longer commands you, because now you walk as conductor, and everything changes, because now you lead. You were never meant to wait, not for the right time, not for a breakthrough, not for someone to explain the path, because the path was never hidden. It was simply quiet. And now, you have heard it. You have remembered it. You have opened the sealed letter that lived inside your spirit all along. It didn't shout, it whispered. Command of self precedes command of life. This was the rule, the one they followed, the one no one talked about, the one that explains why everything else, when all the tactics, all the plans, felt incomplete, because without this inner law you were always building on sand. But now you build on stone. The mirror has been restored, you've walked through. The echo, you've named the noise, you've remembered the pattern. You've reclaimed the flame, and most importantly, you've looked into the mirror and seen clearly you were never the problem. You were simply obeying the wrong voice. That voice, the one that demanded pressure, panic, and proof. No. Longer runs the show, because now there is another voice, steady, sacred, the one you were born to follow, your own. Wealth is no longer a chase. It's a consequence. You no longer chase wealth. You walk in command, and from this posture results are not forced, and they are echoes. Your days now begin from alignment, not alarms. Your energy is no longer scattered, it is consolidated. Your rituals are no longer borrowed, they are sacred. Your clarity is no longer a someday wish, it is now. This is not magic, this is mastery, the same mastery they practiced silently as they rose, as they chose, as they returned over and over to the rule. You are not watching from the outside anymore, you are in it. Your vow is quiet, but irrevocable. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You don't even need applause. You just need to obey the vow. The one that says, I will not betray my own rhythm again. I will not perform for results. I will protect my flame. I will honor my pattern. I will return. I will command. No matter how loud the world becomes, no matter how seductive urgency sounds, no matter how slow the results seem, you remember who holds the baton. You in silence, you in structure, you in stillness and strength. What happens now? The same world is waiting, same job, same responsibilities, same distractions, same demands, but you are no longer the same. Now when resistance rises, you return. Now when fear whispers, you lead. Now when uncertainty knocks, you listen inward before you act outward. This is identity. This is inner command. This is the rule in motion. Not a moment, a lifestyle, a sacred architecture that holds, even when emotion doesn't. And from here forward, you don't build randomly. You build rhythmically, daily, quietly, irrevocably. One final truth. You were never missing anything. You've always carried the code. You just hadn't broken the seal. Now you have, and that changes everything. Because even if you forget for a day, even if the noise creeps in, even if the pattern bends, you know the rule. And what is known can always be returned to. So walk forward, not with urgency, with undeniable clarity. You are not behind, you are not broken, you are not late, you are aligned, you are the flame, you are the conductor, and from now on, you don't wait, you lead. It was never about being ready. It was about remembering who you already are.